Okay, Molly, do you want to get started?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Molly Hull, and I am the gallery director at Meredith College. Um, Meredith College has two gallery spaces, the Johnson Hall Rotunda and the Frankie G. Weems Gallery, which Julia Caston's exhibition um, is hosted within the Frankie G. Weems Gallery. Julia Caston's exhibition is entitled Self-Care, a Mental Health Journey Through COVID-19. And it is running currently until November 7th. Just a little bit of etiquette before I pass it over to Julia. We ask that your cameras remain on if you want to. We love to see your smiling faces, but we understand if you want to keep your cameras off. Otherwise, please remain muted. If you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat. Otherwise, we are happily answering questions at the end of the gallery talk. So Julia, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to this gallery talk. So we are hosting Molly Hull and I, who is running this meeting with me. We're hosting this gallery talk together because putting this show together and all the programming that goes along with this was a very collaborative process. So we've been working on it for almost exactly a year at this. Yeah, almost exactly a year, right, Molly? Because we like first met in October. So we wanted to create a show that addresses issues of mental health, especially as these issues have been exacerbated by COVID-19 and the pandemic we are living through, and also ways in which creativity and exposure to art making can help mitigate some of those effects. So as you can see on this flyer here, excuse me, we had a variety of events that I will talk a little bit about, and there will be some slides featuring them, and then I'll also talk about the art that's in the show, and there'll be some slides featuring that as well. And then Molly and I will have a little conversation, and there'll be lots of time for questions at the end. So for part of our programming, we partner with the National Alliance for Mental Illness, the Wake County chapter, which is ran almost exclusively by volunteers, and they did a workshop with students and community members last week. And then we have a 4-part art therapy session led by Albi Gamaya Bodhi, and Albi is actually one of my collaborators. And I don't think there's a slide about the art therapy, but basically a year ago, I got in touch with Albi through a friend of a friend, and we wanted to offer free art therapy sessions for BIPOC activists. That stands for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, because this was right after a lot of the protests have happened. So we did a pilot session that went super well. So we're having a 3-part series of free art therapy for BIPOC activists and BIPOC students at Meredith. And we kicked off the last one last week. And then the last session is open to everyone, and it's more of an informational meeting about for students interested in art therapy. We also are having a great panel discussion with really awesome local artists, and I guess they're actually national artists at this point: Stacy Kirby and Cheryl Rowland, Leanna Pye, who is an art therapist who graduated from Meredith, and Evan Apple, a student at Meredith. And then Molly will get it more into all the accessibility features of the exhibition, which she is a pro at, after I go through my slides. Can you go to the next slide, Molly?
Potentially.
So this gallery space consists of a lot of drawings and sculptures, most of which, I would say the majority of which, or like 70% of which I did during the pandemic. It includes 2 30-foot scrolls of drawings. One of them is called Artist Scroll, and one of them is called Snake Scroll. On this shot here, you can see the snake's tail, and its head is at the very end. And so this was kind of an experiment in drawing that I wanted to do during the pandemic, and have a way to make really big art in a small space that I was confined to by working on the scroll in sections. And I have detail shots of the scroll. And basically it was super fun to do and challenge myself with my drawing. I do a lot of public facing work, but drawing is a very meditative practice for me. Can you go to the next slide? And then, so that's a close-up of the scroll. And then this is a shot of a collaborative installation I did with my friend Caroline Bugby. You can see most of it. Caroline lives in England. We went to grad school together at UNCG. We wanted to make an we both like to do soft sculpture, and a lot of her work in the past has had to do about food, and I wanted to engage with that topic, and about the joy of food, and just representing a topic to us that is very joyful. So this is fries, a steak, and a martini, and a tablecloth. I guess this is like a deconstructed meal hanging in the space. And this steak, martini glass, martini, and fries is maybe a meal her and I could have one day once COVID travel restrictions are lifted. And I don't know if they've been lifted yet or not, actually. No? Okay, so someday her and I can get together. You can go to the next slide. So these are some detailed shots of the scroll. So, the one on the bottom right, it's me as a blimp, and my air inside my blimp is all the female art mentors that I've had in my life who are holding my blimp body up. And then on the top left is a shot of the scroll in the space. And the mermaid on the bottom has a lot of collage elements, and it's loosely around topics of body positivity. And then the top right is my experimentation with a collage and creating kind of more monochromatic drawings using a fountain pen. And so all of these drawings were a very meditative practice for me, and part of my self-care. And you can go to the next slide. This is another, I have had a decade-long sketchbook practice. This is an accordion sketchbook I made, which holds out to be, I believe, 8 feet long. And we installed a special shelf just to display it. So this is kind of a compliment to the scrolls because it's a linear drawing, but much smaller in size. You can go to the next slide. And so these are some of my sketchbooks that are on display. I've never done this before, but they're available for people in the gallery to leaf through, and they're throughout the gallery. And they span basically an entire decade of me drawing in them. So that's kind of more, the sketchbook practice is definitely a meditative practice for me. I like to say meditative because I really have a really hard time with traditional meditation. And I've had a lot of guilt about that. I've even had like one-on-one meditation coaching at some point that I did as a trade for a pet portrait, funny enough, but it just doesn't work for me. So the closest mindfulness practice I have is drawing. As a part of our partnership with the National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI, we have a collaborative wall in the gallery where people are prompted to write with chalk in response to the I matter because prompt. So these are some of the contributions we've already had so far. And how long has the show been open? Just a week, right, Molly?
Show opened October 12th.
Yeah, and so last Tuesday. Yeah, so about a week. Yeah, so this is what we've gotten so far. Or maybe there's more. Has there been more, Molly, since I last saw it?
There have been some additions.
Yeah, so that's really cool. Okay, next slide. So this is our collaborative coloring page section of the show that we did with local artists and Meredith students. And we'll have some close-ups of these. Basically, the collaborative coloring page practice I started at the very beginning of COVID. I made custom coloring pages for my friends and family who were very anxious and stressed out. And then I had a prior exhibition at a university where the students and I collaborated on coloring pages. And so I have about 22 of these now. And so the way it works is whoever is my collaborator actually fills out a Google form where they answer like some really basic questions about just give me some words and ideas for inspiration and some images for inspiration. And then I'll create them a coloring page on my tablet, which they then color in. And so it's a really fun and simple way to collaborate with drawing. And I'm excited to show you some of the detail shots because both the artists and students did a really great job. So these are some of our, and you can go back to the last slide, Molly, or not. I don't know if you want, but let's talk about this slide. Oh, these are just some excerpts from my other scroll. And this is, I didn't have a picture of this first scroll that I made installed in the Meredith Gallery. So this is where it was installed in another location, but these are just some detail shots. And this is very diaristic and just, you know, dreams I've had or past memories or other experiences. But we can go to the coloring pages. Yeah, so these are some of our awesome coloring pages that people did. Both students and local artists, and they are all on 8.5 by 11 paper. And so they used a variety of materials. Some of them are incredibly good at colored pencils and gave me quite a few tips that I now use. That's changed the way I use that material. And they even used printmaking, and as you can see, they used gold leaf and added a lot to their drawings, and paint too. And then we had a lot of accessibility elements that was super important to us. We worked with Arts. We worked with Arts Access, which is an organization. And I think at this point, Molly, should I hand it off to you?
Sure. So what was another aspect that was extremely important to this exhibition was that because we were dealing with mental health and how it relates to COVID-19 on a college campus, both Julie and I felt that it was extremely important to involve local organizations. So that meant involving Arts Access, which is an organization that's local, dedicating to providing art to the community in accessible ways. We also partnered with NAMI, which was the wall that was written on the wall, "I matter because," and people were encouraged to fill that in. And we also did a partnership with the Art Therapy Institute in Carborough, and they kindly provided us with promotional materials, but also masks in which they hand dyed themselves, which was something completely new to the space itself. Along with these kind of promotional materials and materials to kind of learn more about mental health and resources that were available to them. Them being visitors, students, basically anyone who entered into the space. We included things like labels for visitors with low vision. So in the top right corner, we have a sleeve next to the pink label that includes both large print labels and then Braille booklets. So the booklets include concept statements in Braille, but then on the walls themselves, as you see on the photograph to the left, we have Braille labels that are done in clear on the top of a label that has both the information about the artwork and the concept statement. And then below is a QR code, which you can use to access an audio description through SoundCloud. So this exhibition is the most accessible exhibition that we've had at Meredith in terms of trying to engage as many populations within the community as possible.
Yeah, and Molly really has kind of taken so many great steps to make the Meredith Gallery just more accessible as a whole, and created this great partnership with Arts Access. Did you mention what Arts Access is? It's a local, yeah, okay. And one thing I forgot to mention that's pretty important is the reason this show is about mental health is I consider myself a person with a disability because I have an anxiety disorder I've been diagnosed with for a decade, and often mental illness isn't considered a disability even when it can be very debilitating.
Yeah. I will also say that Disability Services in the Counseling Center at Meredith has also been a huge support in my kind of accessible journey, is what I like to call it, because no matter how much you learn about accessibility, there's also always something that you can do to make a space more inclusive to all. And when you make it accessible, quote unquote, you're making it inclusive to everyone. Denise says, "I love that you included the sketchbooks within the exhibition and allowed people to look through them," which that's been a very popular aspect. I will say that a lot of students have felt Julia, that the sketchbooks and kind of the rawness of your artwork is something that really appeals to them. And they've enjoyed looking through the sketchbooks one by one and kind of seeing your progression, because a lot of them begin in 2016 and then they go on.
Yeah, and a lot of them I did when I was, and like some of them I did when I was their age, when I was the student's age, when I was either in college or a very young adult. So I think like they can probably see and feel that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a little time capsule of how I felt back then.
So Julia, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about your artistic career, because I know that you went on to your master's, but you have kind of an extraordinary career in terms of the grants that you applied for, but also the residencies which you've held. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start at the beginning. For those of you who aren't familiar with my work, so I got my bachelor's at Barnard College, which is affiliated with Columbia University in New York, where I studied art history and art. And I really am glad I studied art history, because I studied with an amazing art historian who did a lot of work about the avant-garde and art of public space and accessibility to marginalized groups in public space and what that means. So that really made a big effect on me. Then after grad school, I moved back to Minneapolis, where I'm from, and then my friend Mac, who's on this call, and my friend Larson and I, we founded a gallery in their apartment, and that was my first arts administration venture ever. So there, it was called The Ledge, and we had 12 solo shows of emerging artists in that gallery, and for some of them, it was the first time they've ever had a solo show. And we also founded an organization called the Minneapolis Art Lending Library, which was a nonprofit that operated for 7 years, that lent art out to the public for free by local artists, and also people bought the art. And oh, Denise is prompting me, because Denise knows me since I was 14 years old. Going further back, how about your first community installation of perspectives for which you received your first grant? Oh yeah, I received my first art grant when I was 16 years old for $1,200 to create a mural at a community center. And that was really cool. And for my mural, I interviewed all the kids who went to the after school program. And then I made like, I was like not very good at painting, by the way, at that point. But I made these like really funny paintings of them playing on the playground and like cooking. And Denise helped me apply for the grant. So that was my first community arts project. And then thanks, Denise. I forgot about that. And then let's see, I went to grad school, which was at UNCG, and I didn't want to teach, but I knew I wanted to work in some capacity as like a culture worker. So I did my assistantship there at the Greensboro Project Space, which was like a very new, cutting edge, scrappy contemporary art center. And that really helped me kind of break in. And then when I moved to Raleigh, it really helped me get my job at the North Carolina Museum of Art. And I worked there for now 4 years, which has been a really great learning opportunity. And some of my fans from there are here. So thank you for being here. And so I've done residencies kind of in Canada and in the United States and in Raleigh. And that really helped me a lot when I didn't have my own studio. Thanks, Denise. Oh yeah, I'm an oracle from outer space that the city of Raleigh, and I train other people to be aliens, and the city of Raleigh has paid me to do this like over the course of at least 2 years. It's okay, Denise. Oh yeah, I forgot. I do a lot of performance art. I'm also a performance artist, and I do just, very, very funny things. Which if you look at my website, you'll see videos of it, but it's a lot to cover right now. Does that I think you want me to talk a little bit about my career, Molly?
That answered my question.
Denise, I don't understand what you're saying. Okay. Molly, what is your next question?
So this exhibition is so drawing heavy. Why
Mhm.
drawing and not another medium?
Because during the pandemic, like when I did my performance where I had to do my performance with my performance that I trained, I had to do it over Zoom, and it really didn't work that well. When I've had interactive street performances, people just show up because they see a weird thing happening. But over Zoom, it really didn't work so well. So instead, drawing, I came back to drawing because you can do that alone. And my coloring pages, I collaborated with them completely over mail the first time around. And with the soft sculpture installation, Caroline sent me her soft sculptures from England, and I stuffed them full of stuffing statewide. So I ended up doing a lot of like smaller scale collaboration, and like my own work on drawing just lent itself very easily to that.
So for those who are not really familiar with the Oracle project, if we go back to your artist scroll, in the top right corner is an example that was taken from that project. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more?
Sure. When the project first began, it was, it was really lo-fi. It's just like these cool boxes, and like my performers wore them on their heads, and they were like all-knowing beings, and people would come wear it. It looked exactly just like that, like how I painted it. And people would talk to them, and they would give them advice. And then it evolved when I had to do it over Zoom. I made these really elaborate costumes for my performers, and there was like a new added element. I made them basically giant shiny orb heads, and they were like they set up their Zoom environment, so everything was like really shiny. And in this twist of the performance as it evolved, they were like all-knowing aliens calling over Zoom from outer space to help humanity during COVID. And then, so for the next iteration, I really want to do this. I want to have a telework oracle where the performers are still calling over Zoom, and they're like calling in from outer space or whatever planet they live on. But I set up like a very fancy canopy tent in a public space so people can come from the street and Zoom with the oracles. I don't know, is that making sense, Molly?
Mhm.
Yeah. Did you have another question for me?
Oh, I have loads of questions.
Okay.
So looking at the scrolls, both scrolls are 30 feet long.
Uh-huh.
When you decided to make the scrolls, why did you choose 30 feet? Why
That's
did
how,
you choose
that's
one
for,
narrative?
what? Sorry,
Why
what was
did
the
you
last?
choose one continuous narrative?
Because I wanted, well, 30 feet, I needed extremely precise dimensions. I needed something that was 18 inches because at the time, my drawing desk was only 20 inches. I needed something that would fit on my drawing desk. Now, I have a home studio and a much, much larger drawing desk. But I happened to come in 30 feet, but I wanted to make the biggest drawing I've ever made within the constraints of my working space. So that's why I wanted to make a story and just like a big work. And that was the way I could find to do it.
And within each scene, so the scrolls are divided into sections. I think with the snake scroll, you have fewer sections in the artist scroll, but with each section, you use a different material, whether that's watercolors, colored pencils, paint pens. Why did you choose those materials?
I mean, basically, I kind of have my little table of materials that I keep in my studio, and those are all materials I've experimented a lot over the years with smaller drawings, and I've kind of refined my palette, so to speak, the different types of materials I like to use depending on what effect I'm going for.
Okay. And my last question, you kind of talked about this a little bit when you talked about your anxiety disorder, but what drew you to Meredith and kind of having this exhibition in the setting in which it's in?
Sure. So I had like a very like preliminary version of this type of exhibition at Incrolite in Raleigh, where I have my artist residency. The idea of like mental health. This was pre-pandemic. I had an exhibition like drawings, and then we had a free art therapy session and a free yoga session. And then it went pretty well, but then I decided that, well, at my job at the North Carolina Museum of Art, I work a lot with college students, and I'm the internship coordinator. And I also had a really hard time with my illness in college. So I thought it would be really cool to place such a project in the context of a student body. And so I visited Meredith and I was really impressed with the gallery space. And also I went to a women's college and I like that Meredith is also a women's college.
Well, part of or actually the main reason why I was drawn to your artwork and the kind of concept of this exhibition is that I'm sure all of you on the Zoom call are aware of the mental health effects that COVID-19 has had. And they're also relevant on a college campus. I too am a Meredith graduate, and just the difference of being on campus now versus being on campus pre-COVID, it's light and day. And so as a gallery director, my goal was to bring an exhibition that could just serve as a little check-in to say, hey, referring to the wall that NAMI sponsored, I matter and this is why. But also it's okay if you need help in additional places. Either way, Meredith and the gallery is here to support you.
Or just the idea, I mean, of like an art space being a community space is really important to me. And like we shouldn't be on like it being like a really key community player in wellness is really important to me.
I agree.
Okay, now it's my turn to interview you. This is the talk show segment. Originally I was talking to Lisa Pierce, who's on this call. It's so awesome of you to be here, Lisa, about having the show, but Lisa was transitioning into a more teaching role and she wasn't sure at that point who would take over directing the gallery. And I remember you reached out to me because you had picked up our email thread and was interested. I guess, why did you decide to reach out to me?
I already touched upon it a little bit, but I think the idea that you went to a women's college was actually kind of one of the main kind of attention grabbers, if you say it that way, in a sense, because Meredith, like Barton College, is an all-women's college.
Barnard,
excuse me. And there is just kind of that kind of camaraderie and the knowing of the being on an all-female campus was something that kind of stood out to me, but also the idea of mental health. Art is a means of communication, whether it's art therapy, whether it's just producing art to relay a topic or what have you. Art is a means in which we communicate. And this exhibition was something that I felt we could use to connect the community intentionally on so many different levels.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've talked about this before a lot, but it's cool to see you kind of say it in kind of a different way. So my other question was, I guess, why did you decide to kind of be an arts and culture worker to begin with?
So at Meredith, I majored in religious and ethical studies and art history. And if you asked me in 2016 what I wanted to be right out of Meredith, I would have told you I wanted to get my PhD and be a curator in a museum. After going to master's right out of college, it was a big wake-up call in terms of, did I really want to be in academia? And I had the opportunity to work in the education department in a museum in Florence, Italy. And during my time at the museum, I had the very unique experience of visiting a prison. And that prison that I didn't know at the time was full of male-only prisoners who were never getting out. So it was a max facility. But what was so unique about this facility was that they were offering an education program. And they were offering to these prisoners language classes, history classes, math classes, basically whatever stimulated their mind. And they invited the museum to talk to them about the cathedral, about the museum in general. And it was a complete eye-opening experience because they were just so humble. And I didn't know really what to expect. And at the end, one prisoner raised his hand and said, well, what's your perception of us? And I said, well, if you were just walking down the street, I would think of you as any other person. I have no right to judge you. I am here purely based on opportunity. And I feel so humbled and honored to be in front of you. And that viewpoint and that kind of experience completely changed the way that I looked at art. I wanted to be on the side of community engagement and education because it gave me the opportunity to provide people um, the opportunity to experience art and see the value of art and understand art in a completely different way than they would have otherwise.
Thank you, Molly. I remember you telling me about this and how poignant it was to you. And it also reminds me, we're both on work in education, community engagement, and outreach. You at Meredith and me at the North Carolina Museum of Art. And so a lot of my art has education and community engagement within it. And I've always had to like do everything myself. And it was incredible to be doing it with someone who is like, it was like multiplying me by 2 in terms of like arts admin power. And I really appreciate all you've done and how incredible you've made this as an experience overall.
We've enjoyed having your exhibition at Meredith. We are a small gallery, but I'm a one-woman show with 5 incredible interns.
Yeah, the interns are amazing. I've been super impressed with just Meredith's students. So I don't know if Evan is here, but they are one of our panelists and an intern. Is Evan an intern? Because they were helping. Evan is an intern and they were great. And then all the other interns who helped out with the show were so awesome. And some of the student coloring page artists are here and they all did like an amazing job. So I've just been generally very impressed with the student body. So let's see. Do you have a creative practice aside from like your education and community engagement work?
Not at the moment. I'm the kind of person that's very critical of my artwork, which is ironic. But I prefer talking about and celebrating other people's artworks than my own.
Okay, so that's all the well, I would argue that that culture work is a creative process. So and what you do. Anyway, that's all the questions I have for you. So I guess we could open it up to questions. So if you have a question, you can stop sharing the screen if you would like, Molly. But if you have a question, you can either unmute yourself or post it in the chat. And just be mindful of like making sure other people can speak and post things in the chat too. Thank you, Denise. Yeah, our admin is the wing. The wind beneath our wings. Totally.
It is an art process for sure.
Oh, good. Elizabeth, that's great. You can start with anything. We should have had art supplies in the gallery. I forgot. Oh, but maybe someone can draw a picture on that wall.
Beth has been a huge help with accessibility at the gallery, and I think this is only beginning of a beautiful partnership and inclusion of art therapy and just in general.
Oh, Mac raised his hand. Hi, Mac.
Hey, Julia. Hey, folks. Thanks for the talk tonight. I've got a question for you, Julia. I know that you've installed at least one of these scrolls in another location, and I wonder if it takes on a different meaning or if you've been able to relate to the piece in a different way based on these different install locations.
It totally does. That's a good question. So when I installed it at the Block Gallery, which is located in the Raleigh Municipal Building, but that's basically Raleigh City Hall. And so it's like a giant, the gallery's 2 stories, and in the middle is a giant marble staircase rotunda, and everything is marble. So I think you saw on my image where the original scroll was initially installed, it was on that marble. So it felt really like actually very funny but in a good way, because the setting is so formal, but the artworks are so playful. But it did feel a little bit out of place. But in the Meredith Gallery, what happens is because there's that bifurcating wall, which we had to use in order to have enough wall space for all the works, each scroll kind of makes its own like mini environment. So it's like these mini spaces of experience that I really like.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harriet, in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions they can put in the chat or just unmute themselves?
I'm curious how, I mean, you may have said something about it, but I missed it, the soft sculptures and how they relate to the scrolls.
They don't necessarily relate to the scrolls, but they relate to the show overall in this like the spirit of collaboration, because it's a collaborative piece, and like joy, or like creating joy, because it's about the joy of food. So stylistically and I guess philosophically, it relates to the scrolls.
Never before as a curator would I say I've hung a steak, a french fry, and a martini glass.
So Molly hung all of those things from the ceiling. It was amazing.
It was an experience.
It was really, really hard for her. I mostly was just like
You were
at the
dictating.
bottom telling her where to put it. Oh, thank you. Because before those that food sculpt plushies, they were installed in 2 display cases and they were extremely static, but this way they're much more immersive. And I know Caroline, my collaborator, really liked it a lot, the way it's displayed at Meredith.
Good.
Do they move around with air currents?
A little bit, yeah. We installed each of them with like 2 we tried to have at least 2 points of contact on each object so that they do have a set orientation, but they do move and sway a little bit. Does anyone want have any other questions, or you can also, I mean, I just put my, if you want, if you're shy, you can email me a question and I'll put my email in the chat.
I will say, I'm going to reshare my screen and share the poster for the panel discussion. So we're calling it the Creative States of Mind. And as we mentioned in the beginning, Stacey Kirby, Cheryl Rowland, Leanna Pye, and Evan Apple will be panelists within this session. I know that in the beginning of the semester, Meredith hosted a panel that was pretty much an informational kind of session. This is more dealing with topics about creativity and mental health as related to COVID-19. So it'll be a little bit different in terms of the kind of approach to COVID and how it's perceived.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add, Molly?
Okay.
Okay, well, I think that about covers it. So if you're in the Triangle area, please do come out and visit. The hours of the gallery are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and Saturday and Sunday, 2 to 5. Right, Molly?
Yep, and it's free and open to the public. We are asking that you use a Campus Clear app to access campus, but otherwise, you're welcome to stop on by anytime.
Oh, and make sure to go to the panel discussion, which is going to be, yes, in this flyer, because the people who are in it are just very smart, interesting, and creative, and do activism, and are really involved in the community. And I'm so excited that they're willing to speak with me. All right, well, if you don't, we're gonna end it here. If no one has any questions, and like I said, oh, good, that's great. I'm just reading the chat. Everyone says thank you for being here. This is the biggest Zoom artist talk I've ever been in, which is saying a lot because it's really